All right, good morning. Let's get started with Sunday school this morning. Let's stand and sing Immortal, Invisible, our God only wise.
Open us in prayer, please. Amen. You may be seated. Thanks for being here this morning. The real question of the day is, were there any donuts left over? No? They had donuts. That's why they were here all earlier. They're usually here early. They were here earlier. No one knows the answer to that? You can't look. There were two that I was just checking what happens between church and Sunday school. This is a couple of announcements from the bulletin this morning. One, the Suncoasters have some more trips on schedule. They're going back to Fred's Market because you can never get enough Fred's. Right, Mike Volkman, that's their slogan. You can never get enough of Fred's Market Restaurant. And they got some other thing. They're going to shop at Detweiler's. How are you? That's a full day. What are you doing? That's Riverview. Have you done this before? And then Palmetto, you loop around, you skip the Skyway, and all right. This is if you got time. You might as well do it, right? Hit all the best spots, and then they've got breakfast at Cracker Barrel. That's the one in town here, and that's coming up on Fifth Thursday. Memorial Day is at the end of this month. It's on Monday the 27th. We would love for you to sign up to let us know that you're coming. You're more than welcome to invite guests. If you do tend to invite a guest you think that they're for pretty sure going to come, please list that down. Let us know. If it's a question mark, you can put a question mark next to it. And then we'll have a baking contest this year. Will be cupcakes. If you are available for a Sunday or a Wednesday night during every month to volunteer in the nursery, we'd love to talk to you about that. Just one Sunday a month or one Wednesday a month would be a great help to us. We're looking to fill in some spots there. we're glad you're here. I hope you're all feeling well. We've had some illness around these parts. Carrie has been sick during the week, and somehow, without seeing him at all, he gave me what he's got, or he had. That's not, you can't do that, obviously, but I'm not feeling the best this morning, so if I don't sing, it's because I'm trying to save whatever I've got. It's not from shouting last night. By the way, I'm not going to say anything about you two. But we won 5-0 last night, and you weren't there. So I'm just developing a pattern. It's because he didn't wear the scarf. Well, you can't undo that now, can you, Kyle? It was the night you should have been there, but I've got some sinus things going on. So if I don't greet you up close and personal today, please don't hold it against me. We'll get a chance some other time down the road. If I don't sing this morning, it's because I'm really struggling that way too. I made a mistake. I can't use, let's just go deep and personal. I can't use regular toothpaste because of the dry mouth from my treatment. And so every once in a while it gets down there, and so the last few days I've used my wife's toothpaste. I'm sorry, you're nodding like you knew that already. And it just burns. Oh, it burns. It cleans your teeth, but man, does it burn. And I haven't recovered yet. There's not enough water that you can do to anybody else struggle with that with dry mouth? You have to use the Biotine. I purchased stock in Biotine 4 years ago. I've tried all the different things. They make so many different. The gel is horrendous. Anybody use that gel? Oh goodness, that's horrible. Just the texture. You get a little gel thing and you put it in. I've got the little tablets that aren't Biotine that stick to your gum. I tried that a few weeks to preach. They stick to your gum and then they slow dissolve. And you can't do it on a Sunday. That's what the days I've tried it. Anyway, I just used the old rinse and repeat, and the toothpaste is a vital necessity. But anyhow, enough about that. So I've got all the excuses out of the way. If I have to stop and blow my nose, you'll understand why. And we are back in the book of Genesis, rapidly drawing towards the close as the month of May closes out. We'll close out this study. This last course, we've done half of the book of Genesis in a rather cursory approach. Genesis chapter 45 brings us to a wonderful conclusion. And we're going to base this morning's lesson on reconciliation of relationships. And I think that's a vital lesson, a message that we all need to hear of how to be reconciled to other people in strained relationships. Even in the most strained. I think that this morning, the lesson that we'll study, the passage in Genesis 45, is probably the extreme condition. You say, well, you don't know my circumstances. I would propose to you that there are some elements of Joseph's story that probably outweigh yours, but that's to be decided. And we acknowledge these three things to lay the groundwork for reconciliation. I would say this to you as we study it. Please don't understand this to be a pie-in-the-sky Pollyanna viewpoint, because I have learned through experience in talking to people that you can do everything right, but there are always two sides to this, at least two sides to this. So you can follow steps very biblically, and it doesn't ensure that the other party or parties will do that. Y'all nod if you understand what I'm saying. There's a long way around to get there. So you can do things correctly and with respect to God, but it doesn't ensure that other people in the situation are desiring reconciliation. However, that doesn't absolve us of responsibility to do our part. And I think that when we do this, it puts us in a place where God can touch even the hardest hearts. And again, I would propose that what we've read through Joseph's life is some really hard hearts, some hard-hearted behavior anyway, that God is able to bring about to a wonderful reconciliation when we consider certain things. There's a caution with a couple of these because we don't want to misinterpret what we mean by that, but we'll cover that when we get there. We do live in a world of broken relationships. You probably have experienced that, seen that, either firsthand or third party. Nowhere is it more evident than in the family, the American family, the contemporary family around the world. The recent statistics from the American Psychological Association indicate that 40 to 50% of first marriages end in divorce, and the rate is even higher for second marriages and following. A recent information from the United States Census Bureau indicates 1,300 new step families are formed each day. regardless of that, conflict in any family is inevitable. I would call it the proximity factor. And we always use that as an example of putting people in a car and driving long distances. And you'll discover that the people you love very well can get on your nerves. I see a lot of smiles and nods to that. I don't need to hear your stories. We talked about it years ago when Meredith and I were dating. Clearwater Christian asked us if we would be on a travel team, a music team that would travel on behalf of the school and represent them during the summer. We did a lot of Christian school chapels and churches on Sundays and Wednesdays. Well, even weeknights as well. We drove from Clearwater up to the Carolinas, out west through Kansas to Colorado. We did a week with young people in a camp out there where we served as counselors for the camp. And then we came back down through Texas, Oklahoma, Texas, the Gulf Coast, and back down here. That's a long trip. And we liked each other. We were friends before we were put on the team. Carissa was in our wedding. Jesse was one of my good friends. He and I were the only two guys. The other people we liked very well. The couple that she played the piano, arranged the music. She was my fourth grade teacher. Her husband, Brian, was a friend and a professor. We liked each other. Just past Kansas. That's not really true. We had fun through Kansas. We determined, if you're from Kansas, don't take this personally. We were supposed to stop in Goodman, Kansas. We drove through the night to get there. We got to Goodman, and we were supposed to, through the day, we were supposed to stop there, and we recognized there was nothing there worth stopping for, and we kept driving to Colorado. Anyway, on the way back, there was illness, and that exacerbated it, and by the time we got back to the Florida border, it was get us out of this van and get us home. So that happens, and it happens with family members even. The closeness, the proximity, the taking for granted that we do of people that are close to us provides opportunities for conflict. Every human being who has ever walked on the planet has been wronged by someone, and the reality is you've wronged people as well. And as difficult as it is to be mistreated by others, it's even more for what they've done to us. Was that you back there, or was that me? Did y'all catch that attitude? Or I feel like this is a setup for conflict. Sergio, what are you pointing at yourself for? I'm going to try it again. I'm back on my mic. Hold on, I've got it I'm going to put it back in the appendix, Carrie, Mike. I tried something different. See what it gets you? Are we back on this one? We're okay? Well, how do you know? You can tell the difference? Oh, Genesis chapter 42 brings us to the end of Joseph's story. We can think that oftentimes that reconciliation might circumvent justice. We are very concerned about justice when someone has wronged us. And when that's happened, if we've been mistreated, it is often more difficult to forgive and to seek reconciliation. But we can learn from Joseph's example that God is directing our lives, the events that happen to us, for his purposes, even when we experience mistreatment from other people. The context of this, I wrote down in my notes as I was thinking about it: gloom, despair, and agony on me. Up to this point, that's Joseph's life. None of it has really been deserving. You talk to people who get in trouble, and it's always the phrase, I didn't do anything, I'm innocent. It's not, and the reality is it's probably not true in most situations. When we read through Joseph's story, would we admit Joseph really hasn't done much to deserve this? On the surface, right? He didn't deserve his brother's hatred. He didn't help it at times. He did the right thing in Potiphar's house, and yet he ended up in prison. He blessed the servants of the Pharaoh, and they forgot him. It's really a story of difficulty brought on by circumstances. He has remained loyal to God through all of these circumstances, and Joseph is finally going to be rewarded. Pharaoh, we talked about last week, had that dream, and the servant remembers Joseph. Joseph comes and interprets it. it happens just the way that he interprets the dream. There are 7 years of great abundance. Joseph is put in charge to lay that portion aside, that percentage aside, so that they will have enough in the 7 years that are lean. And Pharaoh then positions Joseph as second in command. He's proven again his worth. He's proven his worthiness and his skill and wisdom and divine blessing. And so he has basically saved the empire, the nation. And so he's second in command. And it has to really happen that way for the story to play out like it does. We pick up where the famine is now in full force, and it's been in place for 2 years. So 7 years of abundance have happened. They've laid aside the percentage. 2 years in, they're still doing okay because they have something saved up. The famine doesn't stay in Egypt. The famine is not regional. It is much broader than that. And so it reaches Canaan. Jacob is feeling it. Jacob's still alive. His boys are there with him. At least the 11 are. And Benjamin has been born at this time. He's a grown young man, and they're in a very hard position. They don't have enough. The drought, the famine has attacked them. So Jacob says, we're going to have to find help. Jacob sends 10 of the brothers, and he sends them to Egypt to purchase grain. We need to find where they have it and how we can purchase it. Joseph receives them. I'm trying to figure out how much to talk about before we start reading. Joseph receives them. He is not recognized by them. Age and position and attire and, he shaved in the prison, remember, to go into Pharaoh's palace. He looks different enough that, and especially, how many of you have ever met somebody you didn't expect them to be there, and so you didn't recognize them because the circumstances, they're not supposed to be there. His brothers come to him, and they don't recognize him at all. They come to purchase food, and Joseph wants to test them. Joseph wants to know where they are at this point in life. And so he determines that he calls them spies and accuses them of that, and he determines to see if their attitudes have changed. So what he does is he takes his silver cup. It's a positional piece. It's representative. It's very valuable. It's representative of him. As they come and enjoy food, they purchase grain, and they head back out. He informs his servants to put the silver cup into Benjamin's bag of grain. Then he sends them out after the brothers and overtakes them and says, let's just check something is missing. So this is when you leave the store and the alarms go off and you forgot to remove the tags. And so they start digging through, and of course they find it right where they put it. It's in Benjamin's bag. Panic ensues among the brothers. Now here's why. We'll set the stage for this. Joseph was the favored son. And the reason being is, you remember that Jacob had 2 wives, Leah by trickery and Rachel by desire, and then they had 2 handmaidens that gave him children. Rachel has always been the preferred wife, and her son Joseph was the preferred son. She has another son, Benjamin. Now with Joseph out of the picture, Benjamin is a very protected young man. He's very cared for. He is from the wife of Jacob, the desired wife, Rachel. So this panic that's among the brothers demonstrates something. We went through this once. Imagine, if you will, the guilt that has taken place for the last 2 decades. What happened to him? All they know is that they sold him to those caravanners heading down south. They didn't know what had happened to him. They had told their father. By the way, I think perhaps maybe the greatest grief that had been in their life was they told their father that he was consumed by a wild animal, showed the coat with the blood on it, and they had to experience that father's loss, knowing it. That's bad enough, but knowing that it wasn't appropriate, knowing that he's still alive somewhere going into slavery. They've lived with that for 2+ decades. Now to think that they have to go back home without Benjamin is just too much. They rant, they plead, they beg, don't take Benjamin. In fact, Judah offers himself as a... Actually, I'm missing a part. They came without him. He sent him back and said, bring all the brothers. Benjamin comes back. There's actually two parts to this. The second part's the part I wanted to focus on. And Judah offers to go in his place. Keep me as a slave. Don't take Benjamin. Our father can't handle it. Joseph finds out that his father's still alive. Look with me then at chapter 45, beginning at verse 1. They come back. They are in terror that their father would be grieved even further at the loss of Benjamin, and Joseph recognizes now that the time for reconciliation is there. I will say this, Joseph does wait to find out their heart. Joseph does wait to discover how they would behave in that situation. However, he's still desiring reconciliation. Number one, revealing what is true. Now, I'm going to put a caveat with this. Revealing what is true. If we're going to go about this course of reconciliation, there must be truth at the foundation of it. However, if you are the type that says, I'm going to tell you everything you did to me because that is truthful, I want you to know the depths of your hurt and I want you to pay for it. We've now stepped from truth to revenge. We've stepped from truth, but you say, Pastor, it's all true. And I've known some people in my life that say, I just tell you everything. I'm just an honest person. I'm just going to let you know it all. Well, I've counseled people like that and said, that's not always the wise course. You may be revealing all truth, but you can do it in the form of a weapon. You must be truthful, but considerate and wise. So Joseph is going to reveal what is true. Look at verse 1. Joseph could not refrain himself before all them that stood by him, and he cried, cause every man to go out from me. And there stood no man with him, while Joseph made known himself unto his brethren. And he wept aloud, and the Egyptians in the house of Pharaoh heard. And Joseph said unto his brethren, I am Joseph. Doth my father yet live? And his brethren could not answer him, for they were troubled at his presence. Those are some words we need to delve into as to what he's saying. He refrained himself, or he could not refrain himself, which implies to us that he had refrained himself up until that point. Put yourself in Joseph's sandals. Your brothers have come to you now for the second time. You imagine what's going through his mind? All of the replaying of history, all of the blame that goes on them, all of the attitude and the background and their youth. Everything is flashing by his mind. How in the world is Joseph, for this period of time, able to restrain himself from not blurting it out the first moment? I don't know. But he does have a purpose in that. He wants to determine their heart before he gets to this point. So he has refrained himself. He's refrained his emotions. But now the circumstances are too much. They got the best of him. The same Hebrew word here is used in chapter 43, where Joseph exited the room to regain his composure after seeing Benjamin. So the first time that they come, they bring back Benjamin. The second time when he sees him, he is refraining. He's holding back all the emotion that's within him. Now he hears Judah pleading on behalf of Benjamin, don't take him, take us. How different is that from the wilderness scene where they throw him in a pit? How different is Judah? Remember, they didn't just throw him in a pit. Their desire was to kill him. And Reuben had to stop that plan. He sees a difference in them, and now he is no longer able to maintain that. So he says, go out from me. He knows he's going to, as we say, lose it. He's going to break down. He's going to be emotional in this. And so he sends his servants out. He realized that it's unwise for the second in command of all Egypt to lose control of his emotions, to lose it. How many of you think that you want stable people who are able to handle situations in positions of authority? Yeah. We don't want to see the second in command who is guiding us through this great famine bawling, sobbing, weeping, blubbering his speech. And so he sends him out. This very interesting thing that the text tells us here, that no man stands with him. He's alone with his brethren, and he makes himself known. But look at verse 2. He wept aloud. Weeping is this natural, spontaneous expression of emotion. He can't help it. He weeps aloud, and the Egyptians and the house of Pharaoh heard. Well, the best laid plans of mice and men. You guys go out because I don't want you to see me lose control. And I don't know if their ears are to the window or he's just that loud or the doors are, the walls are too thin. They hear him anyway. I'm going to tell you, this is a caterwauling, as they used to say. This is a scene. And by the way, we can't blame Joseph a bit, can we? This is 22 years later. After he's last seen his brothers. This is an incredible time for him. But he's going to help them by revealing the truth. He wept aloud. The Egyptians and the house of Pharaoh heard. And Joseph said unto his brethren, I am Joseph. Doth my father yet live? How many of you have been in a situation where it takes you a little while to process what you're seeing? Did I just see? What did I hear that? Happened to me not too long ago, and I actually looked at someone else and said, what is going on? And they're trying to process it, but they can't. But notice Joseph's concern. Is my father yet alive? Now, he is still trying to reconcile their behavior. Why is Judah pleading on behalf of Benjamin? Is it that his father is really alive? Is there some further ruse? How many of you know that you don't always trust people after they've betrayed you the first time? He's trying to reconcile. Is this a show on their behalf? Is my father still alive? And the verse is so succinct here. His brethren couldn't answer him, for they were troubled at his presence. The Hebrew word there expresses the emotion of someone confronted with something disastrous or threatening or unexpected. It is this panic that overwhelms you. The same word is used if you're faced with obvious doom, the peril that is ahead of you. You're troubled. They are shook. They don't know how to process this. They didn't answer him. I don't know what to do. That'll sound good for the recording, too. His brothers have treated him miserably, and he now possesses the power to repay them for the evil that they had done. Think of all the reasons. By the way, we could be here a long time listing all the reasons that the brothers were troubled at answering. One, they didn't even know it was him. Two, they're trying to reconcile. Why does he care about Dad? What have we told Dad? They're trying to piece this all together. Your brain is a wonderful instrument created by God that allows you to do a whole bunch of things at once. But there are times when what you're trying to process is too much for your brain. What is he going to do to us in return? I mean, there has to be this on the table for their thoughts. He's going to kill us. He is in this position of incredible power that he could authorize our death and not pay for it. He doesn't even have to be underhanded about it. He could just offer this as an order and it's going to be done to us. What's going to happen to Benjamin? What's going to happen to us? What do we tell our dad? What's he going to do? It's just too much, and they stand there dumbfounded and afraid. Joseph reveals truth. I would tell you that the book of Matthew is the wonderful text for us, chapter 18, of the reconciliation of brethren within the church, where we discover that we go and speak the truth. We go and tell the truth. If a brother has aught against you, or you have aught against a brother, you go and tell them. There is no use in pretending. However, and I go back because the caveat is a strong one, if you go to reveal the truth and wield it like a hammer or a weapon, you are not serving your cause. And I would propose to you this: you probably don't really want reconciliation, you want retribution. You want them to pay for what they have done to you. And if that's your cause, please know that restitution and restoration is not around the corner. Well, I'll tell you, I've got a list of everything that you've done, and we're going to reconcile. You've got to know this, and you've got to pay for it. That's not the course that he takes. But he does reveal the truth. And by the way, you have to take this whole story, you have to take it all as a whole to understand how he maintains his attitude in this. But the second thing is recognizing God's will. He's not in it for retribution. They don't know that. Verse 4, recognizing God's will. Joseph said to his brethren, "Come near to me, I pray you." Come on now, if you're in their shoes, come over here. Yeah, if it's all the same to you, I'd like to stay at a little bit of distance. Come near unto me, and I pray you. And they came near. Now, what's the point of getting all close? Well, there's a proximity that family experiences. He has been loudly emotional enough so that Pharaoh's household is hearing it. And so he comes close to them, perhaps in an effort to speak in a more reasonable tone, talking to them closely like family does. I pray you. They came near and he said, "I am Joseph, your brother, whom ye sold into Egypt." I would propose to you that he's still speaking the truth. Now, why does he do that? Is that for retribution? Don't forget, this is when you got somebody under your thumb and you're wriggling it here. You sold me into Egypt, or into slavery, sorry. No, you sold into Egypt. What he's doing there, because the troubling aspect of that is they believe that they have kept a secret among 10 people for 22 years. I would propose you, if you think you're going to do that, it's a very difficult task, especially depending on the people. They believe that only the 10, I don't believe Benjamin has any clue of this, only the 10 even know about this. And now here's this guy in Egypt dressed up like an Egyptian who they're buying grain from, and he says, "I'm Joseph." "Yeah, sure, buddy. Who'd you hear that story from?" And then he says this, that you sold into Egypt. You sold into slavery. There's only one other person in all the world that knows that fact, and it's him. And so he reveals that to them, and then he says in verse 5, "Now therefore be not grieved nor angry with yourselves." Here's the difference between us often and doing this a godly way, recognizing God's will. How sorry do you feel for selling me into slavery now? How bad do you feel? Man, I want you to squirm a little while. The very next thing he says is, don't be grieved, don't be angry with yourselves. Folks, put yourself in that position and imagine all of the reserve and the godliness and the wisdom it takes to say, don't be angry with yourselves. Don't fret. Don't be angry with yourselves that ye sold me hither, for God did send me before you to preserve life. Joseph has this wonderful perspective, a godly perspective. I had to be here first so that I could sell you grain so that you could survive. God sent me here. All right, let's take a quick recap. How? Thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, into Potiphar's house as a servant, betrayed by Potiphar's wife, lied about, put in prison, forgotten about by the cupbearer and the baker, and it languished there longer than he needed to be, and now he's here. All of that, Joseph says, I consider all of that betrayal by every person involved the work of God to send me here first. How many of us look at that and go, God, isn't there a way you could send me more cleanly here? Couldn't you have just put me on the caravan and they just dropped me off here? Did I have to go to prison? Did I have to be betrayed? Did I have to go into the pit? Couldn't you just have given me the command like you gave me the dreams as a young man? Hey, head to Egypt, part with your family like you did to Abraham. Just send me there? No. Joseph is able to say all of the heartache was the doing of God. Recognize the will of God. This is the challenge for us if we're seeking restoration. I know you wronged me. He's not going to slide it under the table. Imagine trying to do that with the 10 guys who put you in a pit and sold you into slavery. Well, let's just not talk about that. No. That's going to eat at every conversation. It's going to wriggle its way in there. It's going to taint the way you act towards each other. No, let's just be honest about it. But God sent me here to preserve life. Verse 6, for these 2 years hath the famine been in the land, and there are 5 years in the which there shall neither be earing nor harvest. By the way, do the brothers, let's speculate for just a second, do the brothers know that there are 5 more years of famine? Not unless Egypt is publishing it. They don't know. It may be interminable. It may end in 6 months. It may end in another 12 years. They don't know, so he's informing them. God has told me there are 5 more years. There's not going to be any kind of harvest. And God sent me before you to preserve you a posterity in the earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. I would propose to you, this is a wonderful insight and recognizing God's will. This is a challenge for us. I would propose to you now that whether you seek reconciliation or whether you're able to seek reconciliation, the person's past, the situation's long gone, I would propose to you to spend some time looking at heartache in your life through God's eyes. Attempt to. Ask Him, God, show me why I went through that. God, show me why this period of my life hurt so much. God, show me why you've chosen this for me to walk. Because that's what Joseph has done. I don't believe this happens in this moment. I don't believe Joseph suddenly comes to a reckoning. I believe when the brothers show up there, Joseph's wheels begin to turn and he goes, aha, I'm not just here to save Egyptians. I'm here to be able to save my family and their posterity. What does Joseph know? Well, Joseph is the son of Jacob, who is by the name Israel, who is the son of Isaac, who is the son of Abraham. He is fully aware as a young man of the promises made to his father, his grandfather, and his great-grandfather. He knows the covenantal promise of a great nation. Remember how tough it was when we studied Abraham for them to even imagine a great nation out of Abram and Sarai who had no children? Imagine how wonderful it was and fanciful it was to think that there would be many nations and as the stars of the sky and the sand. That's hard to believe. Can I tell you another bump in the road? If they all starve, where's the nation? Joseph puts himself in a place where he can say, God is using me to fulfill the covenant to my great-granddad and to my dad and my grandfather. He's using me to do that. That's what he's saying right there, to preserve life. By the way, the understanding in Scripture of preserving life is an intrinsic good. It is a biblical thought. It is an Old Testament thought of Israel. To preserve life is an intrinsic good. People were viewed as a unified whole, not so much as body, soul, and spirit. In the Old Testament, the ancient Jews viewed a person as a unified whole. To save the person, to save their life, was a wonderful act. It should be considered that still. We've diminished our view of the value of it, but it was highly valued to them. And then he says, not just your lives, but posterity, the generations that will come after you, the ones who aren't yet even born, but they will be because you're fed today and in the days to come. And there are 5 more years. God sent me before you to preserve you a posterity in the earth to save your lives by a great deliverance. So now it was not you that sent me hither, but God. And he hath made me a father to Pharaoh and lord of all his house and a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt. I think there is still in this passage here, because remember, we're breaking it down and taking 10 minutes to discuss it. This is all just said by Joseph. They're trying to process this all. This guy claims to be our brother. Doesn't look like it. He's dressed up in Egyptian robes, and he's in a high position of authority, and Joseph is explaining this to them. God put me here. Don't consider that you even did this. God did this. Recognize God's will, or you will really struggle to be reconciled or restored to someone. Final point. Renewing the relationship. Verse 9. Haste ye. All right, hurry up. Go to my father and say unto him, Thus saith thy son Joseph. Well, that's going to be a shocker. Joseph said this. Your son Joseph said, God hath made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down unto me, tarry not. And thou shalt dwell in the land of Goshen, and thou shalt be near unto me, thou and thy children, and thy children's children, and thy flocks, and thy herds, and all that thou hast. And there I will nourish thee, for yet there are 5 years of famine, lest thou and thy household and all that thou hast come to poverty. And behold, your eyes see, and the eyes of my brother Benjamin, that is my mouth that speaketh unto you. And ye shall tell my father of all my glory in Egypt, and of all that ye have seen, and ye shall haste and bring down my father hither. And he fell upon his brother Benjamin's neck and wept. And Benjamin wept upon his neck. Moreover, he kissed all his brethren and wept upon them, and after that his brethren talked with him. I'd love to hear that conversation. He says, I'm the Lord of all Egypt. This is the term, if we were to transliterate into English, Adon. It typically refers to a human being. Not always, but typically. Sarah used the term to refer to Abraham, Adon, Lord. The Pharaoh of Egypt was also called by this designation. He is stating that God had made him Lord or Master of Egypt. Joseph is acknowledging that only God could have brought him through all this unbearable turn of events. Only God could have survived him. Only God could have placed him. He says here that he's going to bring them to Goshen. Now, if you've studied Scripture before, you recognize Goshen as a place, as you hear it mentioned in Joshua, located in the Promised Land. This is a different Goshen. This is a territory at the northeast part of the Nile Delta. The Jews will live there for a period of time, and that's what we see here. The Hebrews occupied this from the time of Joseph until the time that they left Egypt. Now, if you think about it, 400 years are going to pass in some time, not just yet. 400 years of slavery are going to pass. In that time, they are located in Goshen. And the reason being is because they're here now. Joseph is inviting them. I'm going to give you a region of land, and my family is going to be able to settle there. You're going to be able to live here through the years of famine. Well, we look at that and say, yes, perhaps necessary to survive, and God is obviously working in this situation. Joseph acknowledges it. But that also is going to lead to their slavery. When the famine ends in 5 years, they like it really well. The Nile Delta is very rich, and it's desirable. They just settled in. You remember how they came to be slaves? After the passing of many years, there came a new Pharaoh that the Bible says didn't remember Joseph. This Pharaoh is going to remember him he's going to be honored for saving the people for decades. But there comes a time when there's a new Pharaoh and he doesn't remember Joseph. He doesn't care, and he's concerned about Joseph's offspring. He's concerned about the Jews, the Hebrews that are there. So I would say this, for the time being, God is obviously putting them there, but I think they grew comfortable in that temporary situation. The desire should have been to go back to the promised land, but staying there too long opened the door to that slavery. He says, I will nourish thee. He's going to feed the family. The family of Jacob had made their living as herdsmen. Remember how he first came to his brothers out in the fields where he was thrown into a pit? It's because his brothers were herding his father's sheep. There is not going to be any grazing land for your sheep. You have no possibility of making a living, of surviving even, because there is not going to be any land to graze. But he says, I'm going to nourish you here. You're going to be fed. You're going to be taken care of. He is anticipating Jacob's reluctance to leave the promised land and go to Egypt. That's not going to be an easy thing. So this talk here of reconciliation is convince Dad that you've seen me, that you've heard it, that it came from my mouth. Convince Dad that this is going to go on for 5 more years and you won't be able to sustain it. You'll look forever for grazing land for the sheep and you won't find it. You have to come here and allow me to care for you. And then there's this wonderfully tender moment of reconciliation, but not so much reconciliation as just reunion with Benjamin. Benjamin was not a part of his betrayal. Benjamin is the son of his mother. They are not steps in any condition here. They are brothers completely. And so when he had been born, Rachel died, and she named him Benoni, meaning son of my sorrow. But Jacob here calls him Benjamin, meaning son of the right hand. Benjamin will create a tribe which is small, but it's very, very important. When Saul is chosen to be king, he is from the tribe of Benjamin. When we read in the New Testament, Paul lists his resume that he counts as dung. He talks about his training, but he goes back all the way to the pride of his upbringing. I'm from the tribe of Benjamin, the stock of Israel. So it is a small portion, but it is an incredibly important one. And then he says in verse 13, his glory, his esteemed position. Part of the Lord's covenant with Abraham, the promise of a great name, is being fulfilled in Joseph's rise to power. This means his dignity, his splendor, his riches. Now, certainly God's able to do that through Abraham's lineage, far greater than that. But in a small way, his offspring, Abraham and Isaac's offspring, is no longer just herdsmen out in the fields. Now they are risen to prominence. Everyone in Egypt knows Joseph. And he says, tell my dad about my position. Now, that's not just pride. Hey, tell dad I won an award. Tell dad, take the news clippings home. He's telling him, I am in a position to save you, to make you fed. And then it says he wept. Public expressions of reunion among the Hebrews typically included kissing, hugging, and weeping. We see it in a variety of texts, especially in Genesis and Exodus. The scriptures records that only Joseph and Benjamin wept on this occasion. The rest of the brothers then talked to Joseph. This fact may reflect that the older brothers questioned Joseph's kindness, if it's genuine. Later, when their father died in chapter 50, they revealed their fear that Joseph might retaliate. Even in hearing all of this, the brothers, and we can fault them if we want, but I would propose to you we would be the same. They're questioning. This sounds too good to be true. Where's the catch? Where's the fine print? He's going to bring us up here to destroy us all. He's going to bring us up here to betray us to our father and then kill us. And, who knows what goes through their mind? But they're talking with Joseph. This is a wonderful text about reconciliation, but it comes with the revelation of truth. I'm your brother that you sold into slavery. The wonderful recognition of God's will. You didn't do any of this. You thought you did. You've been guilty for what you did, but God brought me here first so that I could preserve life. And then the act of restoration, the act of reconciliation. This wonderful emotional moment when he's hugging on his brother and weeping over him and trying to convince his brothers it's genuine, it's real. God did all of this. Can I propose what I challenged you to do earlier? Consider the moments in your life that you would avoid, that you would wish to never have happened, and ask God, would you show me a reason? And if you don't, I'll still trust you, but I'd love to know, what were you doing in those times of my life that were so difficult? Because Joseph had an understanding. By the way, listen for God's answer. Don't just ask it and then move on. Listen for it. Delve into it and ask, without a heart of hurt, what could God have been doing? Try to put the pieces together and see what God was doing. It leads to wonderful restoration. The encouragement, obviously, with a lesson like that is if there are relationships in your life, through honesty, through recognition of God's will, go seek restoration. It is not always easy, but it is always rewarding when it happens. Father, help us as we work through that in our lives. There is always the potential for hurt feelings. There's always the potential for strained relationships, and I pray that you'd help us to be examples of reconciliation, even as we've read this wonderful one this morning. The course of our life doesn't always follow that pattern of Joseph, but Lord, help us to be courageous in that, to be honest and truthful, yet compassionate, and always wise to see what you're doing in our life. Bless us through your word today. In Christ's name I pray. Amen.